So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with the Incredibles? So let's start the series. The sky tore open without sound. There was no lightning, no vortex of chakra, no sense of being pulled or pushed. One moment, Naruto Uzumaki was standing on the damp grass of Konoha's memorial stone site, his fingertips resting on the cool, rain-slicked granite where the names of the fallen were etched, a ritual of quiet remembrance on an unremarkable evening. The next, he was falling through a silent, starless void, a vacuum that swallowed sensation whole. It wasn't like the Kamui dimension. It wasn't like any space-time ninjutsu he'd experienced. It was absolute absence. Kurama's growl, a constant low-frequency presence in the back of his skull, was severed mid-snarl. The silence was terrifying. In that nothingness, there was no past, no war, no Hokage rock, no village to protect. There was just Uzumaki Naruto, untethered. He landed hard on his side in wet sand, the air knocked from his lungs in a heavy whoosh. The roar of ocean surf filled the sudden, shocking void of silence. Salt spray stung his face. He pushed himself up, his muscles coiled, chakra flaring instinctively to his fingertips as his eyes swept the environment. Moonlight. A wide, empty beach. To his left, a rocky headland. To his right, distant, twinkling lights that spoke of a city, but one whose skyline was utterly foreign, blocky, smoothed, dominated by a single, needle-like tower that glowed against the night. The air smelled of brine, diesel, and something chemically sweet he couldn't place. His sensory net, stretched thin and tense, brushed against no other chakra signatures. Nothing. Not even the faint, familiar hum of insect or animal life he was attuned to. This emptiness was profound. "Kurama?" he whispered, his voice raw. A weak, disoriented rumble answered. "Where is this? The natural energy, it's thin. Stale. It doesn't flow, it just sits." Naruto took a slow, deliberate breath, forcing the Hokage's calm into his bones. Panic was a luxury that got shinobi killed. Assessment first. He was in his standard gear, durable pants, a mesh shirt beneath his open orange jacket, his forehead protector secured. No immediate injuries. The sea was an unknown. The city was a potential source of information, but also of danger. A flicker of movement in the corner of his eye, a large bird with rigid, unmoving wings gliding silently far above, outlined against the moon. No, not a bird. A machine. He melted into the shadows of the headland, his movement silent, a lesson beaten into him by 1,000 failed stealth exercises. From the higher ground, he observed. A paved road ran along the coast. A vehicle sped past, boxy and loud, powered by some form of combustion, not chakra. The architecture of the few visible buildings was sleek, rounded, simplistic in a way that felt intentional, not cultural. This was not a hidden village in a foreign land. This was something else entirely. He moved inland, sticking to the periphery, a ghost in a world that felt eerily still. The suburbs he reached were unnervingly orderly. Identical houses sat on identical lawns under identical streetlights. The few people he saw through windows were gathered around flickering rectangular screens, their faces bathed in a blue glow. There were no patrols, no barrier teams, no sense of layered defense. The vulnerability was staggering. His first real interaction came by accident. A domestic disturbance. A raised voice from a house 2 streets over, a sound of shattering glass. Naruto was on the roof of a neighboring garage in an instant, his senses sharp. Through an upstairs window, he saw a large, broad-shouldered man with thinning red hair, his face a mask of frustrated rage, arguing with a slender, worried-looking woman. Their words were muffled but heated, something about a call, about someone named Bomb Voyage, about the law. The man's fist clenched, and he brought it down on a heavy wooden desk, which splintered under the blow with a sound like a gunshot. Naruto tensed, ready to intervene. But the blow wasn't aimed at the woman. It was an expression of pure, impotent fury. The man stared at the wreckage of his own desk, his anger dissolving into a shame so profound Naruto could feel its weight from across the street. The woman's face softened from fear into a weary, practiced empathy. She approached, not to chastise but to soothe, her hand on his massive arm, her words now inaudible. The man's shoulders slumped. He was a giant made small. This wasn't a shinobi clan compound where power was disciplined and directed. This was a cage. Naruto watched as the woman quickly gathered the splintered wood, hiding the evidence of the man's strength. The performance of normalcy resumed. The light in the window went out. "He's strong," Kurama murmured, his voice gaining clarity. "Not chakra. Something else. Bubbling under the skin. Like a sealed pot on a hot stove." "And she's hiding it," Naruto replied silently, dropping back into the shadows. "They're both hiding it." He spent the next 3 days observing, learning, surviving. He found that the money in his pouch was worthless, mere metal discs and painted paper. He foraged, careful and unseen. He drank from streams he purified with minimal chakra. He listened to conversations in diners through open windows, learning the cadence of the language, which was close enough to his own to decipher with effort. He saw newspapers in recycling bins. The headlines were about stock markets, sports, celebrity gossip. There was no news of conflict, of borders, of war. The peace was suffocating. He learned the word. Super. It was never spoken aloud in public, only in hushed, fearful tones or bitter asides. He found a discarded, water-damaged magazine in a storm drain. The cover was faded, but the headline was clear: "The Age of Heroes is over, the Superhero Relocation Program and you." The article spoke of the incident, of lawsuits, of the greater good. It spoke of heroes not as honored protectors, but as liabilities. It spoke of a law that banned their activities. It featured a photo of a triumphant-looking man in a severe suit shaking hands with a politician. The caption read, "Winston Deaver, CEO of DevTech, heralds a new era of public safety." Naruto's stomach turned. He thought of the third Hokage, of Danzo, of the Council. He thought of the ways institutions could twist protection into control, could pathologize strength. He thought of Gaara, of Kimimaro, of every child raised as a weapon. This world hadn't made its powerful into weapons, it had made them into secrets. Which, in his experience, was far more dangerous. On the fourth night, he saw the fire. It was a towering inferno engulfing a mid-rise downtown bank, orange and malevolent against the dark sky. Sirens wailed, but they were the wrong kind, not the organized response of a firefighting corps with water-style jutsu, but the frantic, mechanical cries of vehicles. Crowds gathered behind flimsy barricades, their faces illuminated by the blaze, smartphones held aloft. The air was thick with panic and something else, a ghoulish excitement. Then, he felt it. Not chakra, but a sharp, localized distortion in the natural energy, a ripple of forced physics. A figure in a dark, sleek suit, not a flak jacket, but something form-fitting and patterned with shifting, circuit-like lines, leaped from a building opposite the bank. He moved with enhanced, but clumsy, strength, landing on the bank's roof with a crash of buckling metal. He tore a ventilation shaft open and dove into the smoke. "Idiot!" Naruto breathed. There were still people inside. He could hear the faint screams beneath the roar of the fire, sensed the frantic movement of trapped life signs. The hero, because that's what he clearly was, illegal or not, was going for the heart of the blaze, likely the source. A distraction play. But the structure was groaning. The fire was spreading down, not just up. The real collapse risk was the third-floor lobby. Naruto didn't decide. He moved. He became a blur of motion, not across rooftops, but through the forgotten spaces, the alley shadows, the blind spot between the gathering news vans, the smoky updraft from a lower, smaller fire. He slipped into the building's service entrance 3 blocks down, a delivery bay for a connected department store, now filling with smoke. He didn't need to breathe, not with the way he could cycle his chakra. Inside, the world was chaos, heat, noise, cracking beams, the hungry roar of combustion. He could hear the illegal hero above, engaging something, the sound of energy blasts, of metal tearing. A fight. Someone was in here with him. But Naruto's focus was lower. He formed a shadow clone, sending it streaking upwards as a decoy, drawing a cascade of falling debris away from his true path. He flowed through the crumbling halls, a water shadow in the hellscape. He found them in a collapsed stairwell, 4 civilians, 2 adults and 2 children, trapped under a mountain of smoking drywall and twisted rebar. One adult was unconscious. A child was sobbing. The air was poison. Naruto's hands moved in swift, precise seals. Earth-style, softened rock technique. The rubble around the trapped people lost its structural integrity, becoming as malleable as clay. He didn't move it, he parted it, creating a narrow, stable tunnel. He was beside them in an instant. "I'm getting you out," he said, his voice calm, cutting through their terror. He made eye contact with the conscious adult, a woman whose face was streaked with soot and blood. "Can you carry him?" He gestured to the unconscious man. She nodded, a fierce, desperate strength in her eyes. He scooped up the 2 children, one in each arm. "Stay close to me. Do not look back." He led them back through the tunnel, his body a shield against the heat. He could sense the building's agony. The fight above was reaching a crescendo. A massive energy pulse shook the foundations. The ceiling above the stairwell groaned. "Run. Now. Straight out, turn left, keep going until you see daylight," he ordered, his voice leaving no room for argument. The woman staggered forward with her burden. Naruto turned, placing himself between the collapsing ceiling and the fleeing civilians. He couldn't use a massive jutsu, the collateral, the exposure, would be catastrophic. Instead, he focused chakra into his palms, not to destroy, but to support. Barrier formation, single-point dome. A small, intensely concentrated hemisphere of chakra flared above them, no larger than a shield. It wasn't meant to hold the whole weight. It was a surgeon's tool. As several tons of concrete and steel gave way, he angled the dome, deflecting the crushing force sideways into an already destroyed section of the hallway. The impact slammed through him, a physical blow that rattled his teeth and drove him to one knee, but the path behind him remained clear, a tunnel to survival. The civilian stumbled out into the night, into the arms of stunned paramedics. Naruto let the barrier dissolve. The smoke and dust concealed him. He could hear the illegal hero disengaging above, the sounds of his pursuit fading. The immediate threat was over. But the cost was just beginning. He slipped out the way he came, a phantom in the chaos. From a rooftop 2 blocks away, he watched. He watched the illegal hero, the man called Gazer Beam. According to a frantic news reporter, get cornered on a rooftop by sudden, militarized police in armored vehicles that had appeared from nowhere. He didn't fight them. He surrendered. The arrest was swift, brutal, and humiliating, broadcast live for the world to see. The narrative was immediate. Reckless vigilante causes downtown inferno, nearly dozens dead. The fact that dozens were alive because of 2 separate interventions was buried under the spectacle of the arrest and the stunning footage of the battle within the fire. Naruto watched the family he'd saved being loaded into an ambulance. The woman was crying, holding her children, her face turned not towards the camera, but back towards the smoldering building, a look of confused gratitude in her eyes. She had seen him. Not clearly, but she had seen him. The Hokage's mantle felt heavier than ever. This world's pain was not from open war, but from a slow, societal suffocation. Its heroes were not warriors in the light, but prisoners in the dark. And he had just broken a fundamental law by acting. He had no village here, no council, no precedent. Only the principle etched into his soul: you do not abandon people who need help. As the first gray light of dawn bled over the city, washing out the last of the fire's glow, Naruto looked down at his hands. They were smudged with soot, unmarked. In this world, they were illegal. In this world, the act of saving a life was a crime if he used the wrong means to do it. He needed to understand. He needed to find the source of that repressed power he'd felt, the family hiding its strength behind a picket fence. They were a symptom of this world's sickness. And perhaps, they were also a key. He jumped down from the roof, landing silently in an alley. The morning newspaper was already on the stands. The headline was massive: Chaos in Metroville, Vigilante Menace Returns. Below it, a smaller, inset photo showed the tired, defiant face of the man he'd seen break his own desk. The caption read, "Former Mr. Incredible declined to comment." The pieces, fractured and unsettling, began to click into place. The war here was cold, silent, and waged against the very concept of a protector. Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage of the Hidden Leaf, breathed in the stale, smoky air of a world that feared its own saviors, and knew one thing with absolute clarity. His presence had just become a detonator. Chapter 2: Suburban Fractures. The Parr House at 1414 Maple Drive existed in a state of meticulously maintained equilibrium, a peace as fragile and artificial as the clean scent of lemon polish that hung in its air. It was a machine of normalcy, and Helen Parr was its chief engineer. Every morning, she calibrated the mechanisms, ensuring Bob's tie was straight and subdued, that Dash's boundless energy was funneled into socially acceptable channels like math worksheets, that Violet's silent retreat into her hair was not a symptom of a deeper despair. She policed the borders of their secret with a gentle, relentless vigilance. The machine began to malfunction on a Tuesday. Bob came home from work later than usual, the smell of stale insurance office and simmering fury clinging to him like a second suit. He didn't slam the door, but the careful way he closed it, the measured breath he took in the foyer, was more telling. Helen, stirring a pot of bechamel sauce at the stove, felt the shift in atmospheric pressure. "Bad day?" she asked, her voice light, a probe disguised as casual inquiry. "The usual," Bob grunted, heading for the living room. The television clicked on, the volume a touch too loud, a buffer against conversation. Dash, picking up on the tension like a seismograph, started vibrating in his chair at the dinner table, his fork tapping a rapid, staccato rhythm against his plate. "Can't we just go? I finished my homework. All of it. The slow way." "We've discussed this, Dash," Helen said, her voice the epitome of calm. "After dinner. And the fork, please." "But it's pointless. I could have been at the park and back 10 times by now." "The point," Helen said, turning from the stove, her eyes meeting his, "is that you are a 10-year-old boy having dinner with his family. That is the activity. Be present for it." Violet, a shadow at the end of the table, said nothing. She simply made her mashed potatoes into a smaller, more compact mountain, her brow furrowed. She'd been even quieter since the fire downtown. The news footage of Gazerbeam's arrest had played on a loop for 2 days. Helen had seen Violet watching, her expression unreadable. The bechamel sauce chose that moment to bubble over, a sudden, sticky cascade onto the pristine stovetop. "Oh, for heavens!" Helen lunged, grabbing a cloth. It was a small thing, a domestic hiccup, but in the charged air, it felt like a system's failure. The doorbell rang. Everyone froze. Evening visitors were rare. Unplanned social interaction was a vector for risk. Bob muted the TV. Dash's fork went still. Violet's head lifted slightly. Helen wiped her hands, her posture shifting from frustrated homemaker to tactical commander in a heartbeat. Bob. Living room. Look, normal. Kids, clear the table. Quietly. She approached the door, peering through the peephole. The man on the porch was not a neighbor. He was young, perhaps in his late 20s, with some bleached blonde hair that defied neatness. He wore simple, durable clothing, dark pants, a faded jacket over a plain shirt. He wasn't selling anything. He held no clipboard. He just stood there, patient, his hands relaxed at his sides. His eyes, a startlingly clear blue, seemed to look not at the door, but through it, as if he were observing the very structure of their fear. Something cold traced Helen's spine. It wasn't menace she felt from him. It was a profound, unsettling stillness. She opened the door a crack, the security chain engaged. Can I help you? The man offered a small, polite nod. It wasn't the smile of a salesman, or the leer of a threat. It was an acknowledgement. Mrs. Parr. My name is Naruto. I apologize for intruding on your evening. I was in the neighborhood and noticed some structural stress on your south side roofline. Looks like recent damage from a fallen branch, perhaps. I do repairs. It was a flawless cover. Bland, service-oriented, exploiting the universal suburban anxiety over property values. But his gaze was not on the imaginary roof. It flickered past her, into the dim hallway, touching on the living room where Bob sat pretending to read a magazine, on the dining room where Dash was slowly stacking plates with exaggerated care. It was an assessing look, and it saw too much. We're not in need of repairs, Helen said, her voice cool and firm. Thank you. I understand, Naruto said, his tone unchanged. It's a difficult thing, maintaining a structure. Making sure the foundation can bear the weight it's holding. Sometimes, the strain is invisible from the outside until it's too late. The words hung in the air, layered with meaning Helen couldn't quite decipher. Was this a threat? A coded message from the government? From Syndrome? Who sent you? She asked, her voice dropping, the pleasantries gone. No one, he said, and the simplicity of his answer carried a ring of truth. I saw the fire. I saw the news. I see the strain. He finally looked directly at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes was like a physical pressure. Your children are very strong. It must be a constant challenge, teaching them to hold that in. Helen's blood ran cold. Her body tensed, her fingers itching to stretch, to wrap around the stranger and fling him off her porch. I think you should leave. Now. Helen? Bob's voice rumbled from the living room. He'd moved to stand in the doorway, his massive frame filling it. The pretense of normalcy was gone. He was Mr. Incredible, a wall of contained power. Everything okay? Naruto's eyes shifted to Bob. He didn't flinch at the obvious display of latent threat. He gave another small nod, this one different, a recognition, like one soldier acknowledging another. Mr. Parr. The desk you broke. It was oak. Quarterson. That's a lot of frustration. Bob's face went pale, then flushed with anger and humiliation. Get off my property. I'm going, Naruto said calmly. He took a single step back, but his presence didn't diminish. The world you live in, it tells you your strength is a mistake. A crime. It tells you to be less so others can feel safe. I come from a place that learned that lesson the hard way. Burying power doesn't make it disappear. It just warps it. His gaze swept past them again, into the heart of the home, where Violet and Dash now stood, silent and watching. The children feel it most. The dissonance. Being told the core of who you are is something to be ashamed of. He turned to leave, then paused, speaking over his shoulder, his voice softer. The family from the bank fire. The mother and her 2 kids. They're recovering at Metroville General. Room 412. They asked about the man in the orange jacket who led them out. I told them he was a first responder. They didn't believe me. And then he was gone, walking down the path with a loose, easy gait, disappearing into the gathering twilight. Helen closed the door slowly, her hand trembling. She engaged the deadbolt, then the chain, then leaned her forehead against the cool wood. The carefully calibrated equilibrium of 1414 Maple Drive was shattered. Who was that? Bob demanded, his voice low and dangerous. He knew, Violet whispered from the dining room. Her voice was hollow. He knew about Dad's desk. He knew about us. He was at the fire, Dash said, his eyes wide. He said he was. Was he the other one? The one the news didn't talk about? The one who didn't get caught. We don't know anything, Helen said, pushing away from the door, forcing command into her voice. He could be with the government. He could be a provocateur. He could be a rival. We do not engage. We lock down. We pretend tonight never happened. He said the family was asking about him, Bob muttered, pacing the living room like a caged bear. He saved people. And he came here. He connected us to it. That's exactly the problem, Bob, Helen snapped, her composure cracking. He made a connection. He painted a target on this house just by showing up. We have protocols for a reason. Protocols? Bob stopped pacing, rounding on her. Protocols are what keep us sitting on our hands while buildings burn and guys like Gazerbeam get hauled off to jail for trying to help. That man, Naruto, he helped. He didn't get caught. Maybe he knows something we don't. Or maybe he's the reason the SRA agents will be on our doorstep tomorrow. Helen shot back. We have a family to protect, Bob. Not just from the law, but from exposure, from the world seeing what they are. What they are is powerful, Helen. Bob's voice shook the light fixture. And we're teaching them to be afraid of it. In the ensuing silence, the words hung like smoke. Violet flinched. Dash looked between his parents, a confused hope battling with fear on his face. Helen closed her eyes, drawing on a deep well of resilience. We are teaching them to survive, she said, each word precise. In the world that exists, not the one we wish for. Now we are going to eat dinner. We are going to talk about school and homework. And we are going to forget that man was ever here. The dinner was a silent, tense pantomime. The bechamel sauce had curdled. Later, in the dead of night, Helen lay awake beside Bob's snoring form. Her mind was a whirlwind of contingency plans, escape routes, counter-narratives. But beneath the tactical calculations, a quieter, more insidious thought gnawed at her. The stranger's words. The dissonance. Being told the core of who you are is something to be ashamed of. She thought of Violet, willing herself to disappear. She thought of Dash, a hummingbird trapped in a jar. She thought of Jack in his crib, his minor fevers sometimes making the mobile above him spin in the wrong direction. Bob had been right about one thing. The man, Naruto, had not seemed afraid. Not of them, not of the law. He had seemed sorrowful. And he had seen their strain with a clarity that was terrifying. Across the hall, Violet was also awake. She sat at her window, her knees pulled to her chest, invisible to the world outside. The stranger's blue eyes were etched in her memory. He hadn't looked at her like she was a problem, or a freak, or a secret to be kept. He had looked at her like she was a person under a terrible weight. And he had seen the weight itself. She thought about the mother from the fire, in room 412. Asking about a man in an orange jacket. A man who wasn't a sanctioned hero, wasn't a flamboyant vigilante. Just someone who helped. For the first time in a long time, Violet Parr wondered what that might feel like. Not to use her power for spectacle or secrecy, but simply to help. The thought was so alien, so dangerous, it made her shiver. She wrapped her arms tighter around herself and faded fully from view, a ghost in her own home. Downstairs, in the dark, silent living room, a floorboard creaked. It was not the settling of an old house. It was the subtle, controlled pressure of a footstep. Naruto Uzumaki stood in the shadows, having bypassed the locked doors and simple alarm system with a shinobi's ease. He did not move, did not search. He simply stood and sensed. The residual emotions in the room were a chaotic mural: Bob's frustrated rage, Helen's anxious control, Dash's restless energy, Violet's silent despair. And beneath it all, from upstairs, a faint, chaotic pulse of untamed power from the infant's room, Jack's latent abilities, churning like a storm in a teacup. This is a poison. Kurama's voice echoed in his mind, a low, displeased growl. They ferment in here. The big one's anger is a pressure cooker. The girl's sadness is a slow cold. The boy's energy is a trapped lightning strike. This normalcy is a disease. They're trying to protect each other. Naruto replied silently, his heart heavy. He'd seen this before, in the early days of the Uchiha, in the isolation of Jinchuriki. Family, turned into a cage by outside fear. He had come back not to threaten, but to confirm. To feel the truth of the situation from the inside. The Pars were not villains. They were casualties of a war on identity. And the man called Syndrome, whose name he'd gleaned from newspaper archives and whose technological signature he could now vaguely sense as a distant, oily smear on the edge of his perception, was a symptom of the same sickness. A man so obsessed with other people's power that he sought to own it, to commodify it. He had made a tactical error approaching them openly. He had scared them. He would need a different approach. They needed to see they weren't alone, and that hiding was not the same as safety. As he turned to leave, his eye caught a framed photo on the bookshelf. A younger, beaming Bob Parr in a heroic pose, with a slimmer, smiling Helen and a tiny Violet. The photo was tucked behind others, half hidden. A relic of a forbidden past. Naruto's jaw tightened. This world hadn't just outlawed actions, it had outlawed memory. It had outlawed pride. He vanished from the living room as silently as he'd arrived, leaving behind only the faint, lingering scent of night air and a profound sense of disquiet. The fracture lines in the Parr household had been deepened, not by an attack, but by a moment of seen truth. The path forward was shrouded in risk. But Naruto Uzumaki had never been one for safe roads. He needed an ally within this world, someone who understood the cost of the shadows. He needed to find the man called Frozone. And he needed to do it before Syndrome, or the government, decided the anomaly named Naruto was a threat that needed to be erased. The quiet war for the soul of this world's heroes had just begun, and he had inadvertently fired the first, quiet shot across the bow of a family already sinking under the weight of their own denied potential. Chapter 3: Friction Burns. The insurance office was a purgatory of beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige desks housing beige souls whose dreams had been processed, filed, and denied. Bob Parr sat in his cubicle, a giant compressed into a cardboard and fabric cell, his fingers threatening to dent the metal frame of his chair with every keystroke. The numbers on the screen blurred into a river of meaningless data. All he could see was the stranger's face, Naruto, and the quiet, piercing clarity in his eyes. The desk you broke. It was oak. Quarterson. That's a lot of frustration. The humiliation was a live wire in his gut. That this outsider, this phantom, had seen his private shame, the loss of control he hid even from Helen. It was worse than any defeat by a supervillain. Villains at least acknowledged your power. This man had acknowledged his weakness. His boss, Gilbert Huff, slithered into the cubicle opening, his voice a nasally drip of condescension. Parr. The Chronos account. The actuarial projections. I need them disentangled, disaggregated, and on my desk by 3. The client is feeling insecure about their portfolio's resilience. Bob didn't look up. It's 11:30. And your point is a subatomic particle I cannot perceive with the tools given to me, Huff said, smiling his thin, joyless smile. We are in the business of selling safety, Bob. The illusion of control. You of all people should understand the value of that. The barb, intended as a generic corporate platitude, hit with the precision of a scalpel. Bob's hand stilled on the mouse. The plastic casing gave a faint creak. Problem with the hardware? Huff asked, his eyes flicking to Bob's whitening knuckles. No, Bob ground out. No problem. Glad to hear it. 3 o'clock. Huff slithered away. The frustration was a physical pressure, a swelling tide behind his sternum. He needed to move. To exert force. To be Mr. Incredible, if only for a moment. The urge to stand up, to flip the desk, to tear the ceiling panel from its rails and roar was a primal scream in his skull. He'd been subduing that scream for 15 years. Instead, he stood up, the chair rolling back and bumping the partition with a thud. I'm taking my lunch, he announced to no one in particular. He drove not to the usual bland deli, but aimlessly, his hands tight on the wheel of the family sedan, a vehicle as subdued and practical as the life it represented. He found himself in an older, industrial part of the city, near the wharves. The buildings were grimy, forgotten. He pulled into the parking lot of a boarded-up gym, the Pistons Power Palace sign hanging by a single rusted bolt. This was his secret. His shrine. Around the back, a rusted fire escape led to a basement window with a broken lock. He slipped inside, into the profound, dusty dark. He didn't turn on the lights. He didn't need to. He navigated the cavernous space by memory, past dead-weight machines and rotting punching bags, to a far wall. He placed his palms against the cold cinder block, found the hidden seam, and pushed. A section of the wall swung inward on silent, well-oiled hinges. Beyond was a space that was not beige. It was a museum of himself. His old costume, repaired and hanging in a sealed glass case, the iconic eye emblem seeming to gather what little light there was. News clippings of his exploits, laminated and mounted. Trophies, the bent gun barrel of a robber, a section of the monorail track he'd once stopped from collapsing. And in the center, a state-of-the-art, custom-built powerlifting rig, along with a series of increasingly dense alloy pels for striking. This was where Bob Parr came to remember he was Mr. Incredible. To push his body against immovable objects until they moved. To feel the strain, the burn, the glorious, uncomplicated proof of his strength. Today, it felt hollow. He changed into workout gear, simple gray sweats, and approached the main lifting rack. The bar was loaded with calibrated weights no normal human could even budge. He gripped it, the cool metal familiar against his calloused palms. He took a deep breath, braced his legs, and pulled. The weight came up, smooth and effortless. He did a set of 10, then 20. His muscles sang with the exertion, but his mind was elsewhere. He saw Gazer Beam being perp-walked. He saw Helen's frightened, controlled face at the door. He saw the stranger's knowing eyes. The children feel it most. The dissonance. With a guttural shout, he slammed the bar back onto the rack with a deafening clang that shook dust from the ceiling. It wasn't enough. He needed impact. He moved to the heaviest pel, a solid cylinder of tungsten carbide composite used for testing industrial crushers. He began to strike it, open-handed slaps that would have pulverized concrete. Each blow was a punctuation mark to his thoughts. Thwack. Helpless. Thwack. Useless. Thwack. A ghost in my own life. Thwack. They're right to fear us. Look at me. The pel began to glow faintly red at the point of impact, the air heating up. Bob didn't feel the pain in his hands. He welcomed it. Interesting technique. The voice came from the shadows by the entrance to the secret room. Bob whirled, his body coiling into a defensive stance he hadn't used in years. Naruto stood there, leaning against the doorframe, arms crossed. He wasn't dressed for stealth now, just in his simple clothes. He looked utterly relaxed, but his eyes were actively scanning the room, the shrine, the equipment, the man in the midst of his breakdown. How did you find this place? Bob's voice was a dangerous rumble. This was his sanctum. Its violation was a profound, intimate trespass. You're not as careful as you think, Naruto said, his tone conversational. He didn't move from the doorway, a non-threatening posture that somehow felt more threatening. You have a pattern. Frustration at work, a long drive to clear your head, but you always pass within 3 blocks of this district. The dust on your shoes has a specific mineral composite found near the old wharves. And you carry the smell of old sweat, machine oil, and frustration. It's not hard to follow. Get out. The words were flat, final. You're training wrong, Naruto continued, as if he hadn't heard. He nodded toward the glowing pel. That's just venting. It's not discipline. You're reinforcing your own anger, not mastering your power. You're treating your strength like a symptom to be managed, not a tool to be honed. You don't know anything about me, Bob snarled, taking a step forward. The floor trembled. I know you're a father who is terrified his children will inherit his cage, Naruto said, his blue eyes holding Bob's gaze without flinching. I know you love your wife but resent the safety she engineers. I know you come here to feel alive, but all you feel is the ghost of a man the world decided shouldn't exist anymore. Bob moved. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was a geyser of pent-up rage erupting. He crossed the distance in a blur of superspeed, his fist drawn back, not to kill, but to send this infuriating, perceptive ghost through the wall and into the next county. The punch never landed. Naruto wasn't there. He hadn't seemed to move with blinding speed, he simply wasn't in the path of the blow. Bob felt a faint whisper of air as Naruto appeared beside him, his hand not striking, but resting lightly on Bob's extended forearm. Anger is a fuel, Naruto said, his voice calm, close to Bob's ear. But if you let it control the engine, you crash. He applied a subtle pressure, a pinpoint grip on a nerve cluster Bob didn't even know he had. It wasn't painful, but it caused his mighty arm to go momentarily numb, the fist unfurling. Bob roared, swinging his other arm in a wide backhand. Naruto ducked under it, flowing like water around a rock. He planted a foot behind Bob's heel and gave a minimal push. It wasn't enough to trip a man of Bob's mass and balance, but it disrupted his aggressive momentum, forcing him to take an awkward step to recover. You're strong, Naruto said, circling him now, a teacher assessing a student. Probably the strongest physical being I've ever encountered. But you're trying to solve every problem with a single tool, force. What do you do when the problem is a hostage situation in a collapsing building? When the threat is a poison gas in a crowded subway? When the enemy is an idea, a law, a fear? I save people, Bob bellowed, charging again, this time trying to grab him. Naruto didn't evade the grab. He let Bob's hands close on his jacket. Then, using Bob's own immense forward force, Naruto pivoted, his body becoming a lever. He guided Bob's charge, redirecting it, sending the bigger man stumbling past him and into the tungsten pel with a monumental gong that left a Bob-shaped dent in the superdense metal. Bob staggered back, more shocked than hurt. The sheer, effortless control this man exhibited was unnerving. He hadn't been overpowered. He'd been outmaneuvered. Played. Saving people isn't just about stopping the bad guy, Naruto said, releasing his jacket and taking a step back, giving Bob space. It's about minimizing harm. It's about choosing the path that leaves the fewest scars, on the city and on the people in it. Your way, the old way, it was about the victory. The applause. What happens when the applause stops, and all that's left is the bill for the damage and the fear you inspired? Bob leaned against the dented pel, breathing heavily, not from exertion but from the collapse of a worldview. You talk like you've seen it. I have, Naruto said, his voice gaining a gravelly weight. I come from a village of warriors. We were tools of our state used in hidden wars. We were feared by our own people sometimes. We caused collateral damage. We created orphans. We learned, through rivers of blood and loss, that power without wisdom, without restraint, without a heart that aches for the civilian caught in the crossfire, that power is just a prettier kind of destruction. He looked at the shrine, at the glorified headlines. You were heroes. But did you ever stop to think about the people whose homes were destroyed in your battles? The ones who didn't get a photo op with Mr. Incredible, just a condemnation notice from their insurance company? The words hit Bob like a physical blow. He thought of the Parr family principle from the golden years. No matter how many times you save the world, it always manages to get back in jeopardy again. It had been a joke. A boast. He never truly considered the cost of that cycle, because he'd always been too busy being the one to stop it. Why are you here? Bob asked, the fight gone out of his voice, replaced by a weary confusion. Why us? Because your family is a pressure point for this whole sick system, Naruto said. And because I can sense the fracture lines in your son, in your daughter. They're holding themselves together with tape and guilt. Dash's energy is turning inward, becoming anxiety. Violet's power is becoming a tool for self-erasure. And your infant, his power is a chaotic storm with no eye. You can't fix that by lifting heavier weights in a hidden room. Bob slid down to sit on the floor, his back against the pell. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a cold, clear clarity of shame. What am I supposed to do? The law. The law is afraid. Naruto interrupted. It's a scared child lashing out. You can't negotiate with that. You can only demonstrate a better way. But you have to know a better way first. He walked over and sat down on the floor a few feet away, not facing Bob, but looking out at the dark gym. It was a companionable, non-confrontational posture. I can't give you your old life back. That world is gone. But I can maybe help you build a new one. One where your kids don't have to hate what they are. How? The word was a plea. By teaching them what nobody ever taught you, Naruto said. Restraint isn't suppression. Control isn't fear. Power is a responsibility, not an identity. He looked at Bob. Your friend. Lucius Best. He still operates, doesn't he? Quietly. Bob's head snapped up. How do you know about Frozone? I listen. I sense. His pattern is different. He's found a balance. Of sorts. I need to meet him. Bob was silent for a long time, the only sound their breathing in the dusty dark. The stranger had dismantled him, physically and ideologically, in under 10 minutes. And instead of feeling defeated, Bob felt a strange, fragile seed of hope. This man wasn't offering a return to glory. He was offering a path through the shame. He's careful, Bob said finally. He won't trust you. He shouldn't. Naruto agreed. Trust is earned. Can you get a message to him? Not a meeting. Just a point of contact. A time and place where he can observe, from a distance, with no obligation. Bob studied the young man's profile. The scars around his eyes and on his cheeks spoke of a life of violence, but the calm in his demeanor spoke of a peace hard won. He wasn't a hero from the old days. He was something else entirely. A soldier who had seen the aftermath. There's a frozen yogurt place on 5th and Grand, Bob said, the words feeling treasonous and liberating. Lucius takes his wife there every Friday at 7 p.m. He's a creature of habit. He sits at the corner booth, back to the wall, facing the door. Naruto nodded. Thank you. He stood up, brushing dust from his pants. Go home, Bob. Your family needs you. Not Mr. Incredible. Just you. The man who is strong enough to be gentle. He walked towards the secret entrance. Naruto, Bob called out, stopping him. Naruto paused, looking back. The desk, how did you really know? Naruto's expression was unreadable. I told you. I see the strain. He tapped the side of his head. Not just in the wood. In you. The fracture lines are the same. He slipped out, leaving Bob Parr alone in the temple of his past, surrounded by the relics of a hero who no longer existed, with the terrifying, exhilarating notion that he might have to learn how to be a man, and a father, all over again. The friction burn of his old life was raw and painful. But for the first time in 15 years, it felt like a beginning, not just a slow, beige ending. Chapter 4, Invisible Girl, Scene. The Parr house was a carefully calibrated ecosystem in the wake of the intrusion. Bob's brooding silence had shifted into a pensive, almost restless energy. He was present at dinner, asking questions about school, but his eyes were distant, as if listening to a faint, far-off signal. Helen's vigilance had tightened from a general state of readiness to a focused, professional-grade surveillance. She noticed the new, almost imperceptible wear on Bob's favorite driving shoes, the dust from the wharves. She didn't ask? She catalogued. Dash vibrated with unspent curiosity, pelting his father with questions about the roof guy that were expertly deflected. The forbidden topic crackled in the air, a static charge that made the normal conversations feel like poor dubbing. Violet, however, retreated further. The stranger's words had not ignited a spark in her, but had instead poured cold water on the already faint embers of her sense of self. Being told the core of who you are is something to be ashamed of. He had seen her shame. He had named it. And in naming it, he had made it more real, more solid, a wall she could feel against her skin. She spent more time fully invisible, not just as a power, but as a presence. She ate meals as a faint shimmer at the edge of vision, answered questions in monosyllables that seemed to come from the empty air. Her homework was done perfectly, her room was spotless. She was erasing herself with a diligence that terrified Helen more than any tantrum. It was Thursday. Helen had taken Jack for his checkup, a nerve-wracking ritual of normal pediatric care where every giggle, every strange look from the baby, was a potential exposure. Bob was at work, grinding through the Chronos account. Dash was at school, a container for kinetic energy. Violet was home, officially sick, with a headache. She sat in the backyard, under the old oak tree, a book open but unread on her invisible lap. She was practicing. Not her powers, but her absence. She focused on making her breathing silent, her heartbeat slow, the heat signature of her body dissipate into the cool autumn air. She wanted to be nothing. A vacuum. A perfect, peaceful zero. That's a difficult technique, a voice said, quiet and calm. Holding it for so long. Most people can't sustain true silence. Violet didn't startle. She simply solidified. Her form flickered into visibility, sitting cross-legged under the tree. Naruto stood at the edge of the property, just outside the fence line, hands in his pockets. He hadn't climbed it. He just stood there, as if he'd been a part of the scenery all along. You're trespassing, she said, her voice flat. She didn't look at him. I am, he agreed. I apologize. I wanted to check on you. You're retreating further. There's nowhere to retreat to, she murmured, tracing a pattern in the grass with a visible fingertip. He didn't offer false comfort. He didn't say it gets better. He just watched her for a moment. Your invisibility, it's not just light refraction, is it? It's a full-spectrum dampening field. You bend energy waves around yourself. Light, sound, thermal, even some low-level electromagnetic. It's incredibly sophisticated. And tiring. Her head lifted slightly. No one had ever described it like that. Not even her parents. To them, it was just Violet's invisibility. A trick. A hiding place. How do you know that? I can sense energy. Its flow, its suppression. He took a step closer, still outside the fence. The way you're holding it, you're creating a shell. A perfect empty shell. But you're still inside. The feelings don't disappear. They just echo in the hollow space. Tears pricked at Violet's eyes, hot and shameful. She willed them not to fall. What do you want? To talk. Not as a, what's the word? Super. Not as a teacher. Just as someone who understands what it's like to be told you're a monster by the very people you're supposed to protect. That got her full attention. She looked at him. His face was serious, scarred, older than his years. He didn't look like a monster. He looked tired. You. He nodded. For a long time. The thing inside me, it was a weapon. A disaster. Everyone feared it. Feared me. I was isolated. Told to be quiet, to be less, to not exist. So I tried. I tried to be invisible, in my own way. Loud, obnoxious invisibility. It didn't work. The pain just metastasized. What changed? The question was out before she could stop it. Someone saw me, he said simply. Not the power. Not the monster. Me. The lonely boy underneath. And they didn't look away. They kept looking, even when it was ugly. That's the first step. Letting someone see you, really see you, even the parts you think are unbearable. Violet looked down at her hands, now fully visible, pale and ordinary. What if there's nothing to see? Naruto was silent for a long moment. Then, he did something unexpected. He sat down on the grass on his side of the fence, making himself her equal, not a towering adult. Can I tell you a story? Not about me. About a friend of mine. Her name was Hinata. Violet gave a slight, almost imperceptible nod. She was from a very powerful, very strict clan. Her gift was a form of profound perception. She could see the chakra, the energy system, in all living things. She could see Tenketsu points, the openings and closings of the energy pathways. It was an incredible talent for healing, for understanding. But her family, They valued only offensive power. Brute force. They saw her gentle side as weakness. They ignored her. They made her feel small, worthless, invisible. Violet's breath caught. She didn't look up, but she was listening with every cell in her body. She retreated. Into silence. Into a shell of obedience. She believed what they told her, that she was a failure, a disappointment. That her core self was flawed. Naruto's voice was soft, remembering. But her gentleness wasn't weakness. It was a different kind of strength. A strength of precision, of empathy, of seeing what others missed in their rush to fight. It took her a long time, and a lot of pain, to realize that her way of seeing the world wasn't wrong. It was essential. She became one of the most important people in my life. Not despite her gentleness, but because of it. She saved me, in more ways than one. By seeing me, and by finally letting me see her. The backyard was quiet, save for the rustle of leaves. Violet's tears fell now, silent tracks down her cheeks. She didn't wipe them away. Your power isn't just for hiding, Violet, Naruto said, his voice firm but kind. That field you create. It dampens energy. What if, instead of dampening yourself, you learn to dampen other things? A concussive blast in a crowded street. The heat from a fire, to protect someone. The sound of a crumbling building, to give people a moment of clarity in their panic. The electromagnetic pulse of a bomb. You could create pockets of safety, of silence, in the middle of chaos. You could be a shield, not a ghost. The concept was so alien, so revolutionary, it stole her breath. Her invisibility, as something useful? Not as a party trick or a way to avoid Tony riding us eyes in the hallway, but as a tool? A protective measure? I don't know how, she whispered. I can help with that, he said. Not the specifics of your power. That's your biology. Your art. But I can teach you control. Discipline. How to focus your mind, to direct your will with precision. How to breathe so the fear doesn't choke you. Your power is an extension of your emotions, right? When you're scared or embarrassed, you vanish. She nodded, surprised he'd deduced that. That means you have a profound connection between your inner state and your outer expression. That's a gift. It's also a vulnerability. If you can learn to master your inner state, not suppress it, but understand it, channel it, you master your power. It becomes a choice, not a reflex. He stood up, brushing grass from his pants. You don't have to decide now. And you should talk to your parents. This isn't a secret I want you to keep from them. But think about it. The world tells you to be less. I'm telling you that you have the potential to be so much more, in a way only you can be. Not like your dad. Not like your mom. Like Violet. He began to turn away. Wait. He stopped. Your friend, Hinata. Is she okay now? A small, genuine smile touched Naruto's lips, softening the scars. She's more than okay. She's the heart of our family. She's strong in ways that move mountains quietly. He met her eyes. You can be too. You already are. You just have to believe the evidence of your own eyes. He gave her a final nod and walked away, not vanishing in a blur, but simply strolling down the sidewalk until he turned the corner and was gone. Violet sat under the tree for a long time, visible, her mind a whirlwind. For years, her power had been a source of shame, a thing to be clamped down, a manifestation of her social anxiety. He had reframed it as a sensitive instrument, a potential tool for protection. He had seen not a defect, but a latent skill. She thought of the force field she could sometimes generate, brittle and panicked. Could that be refined? Could her invisibility be a localized effect, projected outward? A strange, unfamiliar feeling began to warm her chest, cutting through the perpetual low-grade chill of her fear. It wasn't happiness. It was possibility. It was the faint, terrifying notion that maybe, just maybe, the very thing that made her feel like a freak was the thing that could make her whole. When Helen returned with Jack, she found Violet in the kitchen, visible, making a sandwich. Not hiding. Feeling better, sweetie? Helen asked, her mom radar instantly pinging at the subtle shift in her daughter's energy. A little, Violet said, and it wasn't a complete lie. She looked at her mother, really looked at her, the fine lines of worry around her eyes, the permanent slight tension in her shoulders. She saw the strain, just as the stranger had. Mom, do you ever think our powers could be used for things other than what they were? Or hiding? Helen froze, the diaper bag halfway to the counter. Her eyes searched Violet's face. This was new. This was dangerous. This was hopeful. What do you mean, Vi? I don't know, Violet said, looking back at her sandwich. Just wondering. Later that night, in her room, Violet didn't practice being invisible. She sat on her bed and closed her eyes. She thought about her breath. She thought about the shell she created, the energy field. Instead of pulling it tight around herself like a shroud, she tried, just for a second, to imagine it as a bubble. A small, controlled bubble around the glass of water on her nightstand. She focused on dampening the sound of the house, the faint hum of electronics, leaving only the bubble of silence around the glass. Nothing happened. She opened her eyes, disappointed. But then she noticed the usual faint ring of water in the glass, a tiny meniscus caused by the distant rumble of the furnace, was perfectly, unnaturally still. As if in a vacuum. Her heart hammered against her ribs. It was a microscopic change. Meaningless. But it was a change she had directed. Not a reflex. A choice. She looked at her hands, no longer seeing just tools for disappearing, but potential tools for creating silence, for shielding, for protecting. The invisible girl had been seen, and in being seen, had been given a lens through which to see herself differently. The path ahead was shrouded in fear and legal peril, but for the first time, it wasn't a path leading to a void. It was a path, however faint, leading somewhere. And that was the most terrifying, and the most hopeful, thing she had felt in years. The cage of her identity hadn't been opened, but she had just found a single, fragile bar that felt less like iron and more like a choice. Chapter 5, Frozen Calculus. The frozen yogurt shop on 5th and Grand was a temple of synthetic cheer. Pastel colors, rounded furniture, and a low hum of frothing machines created an ambience of enforced levity. It was, Lucius Best mused as he spooned a bite of non-fat tart cherry swirl, the perfect place to be invisible. No one expected a serious conversation over sprinkles. His wife, Honey, was debating the merits of crushed cookie topping versus fresh fruit with a solemnity usually reserved for peace treaties. Lucius smiled, playing his part, the supportive, slightly bored husband. His eyes, however, were never still. They tracked the door, the windows, the other patrons, the reflections in the stainless steel napkin dispensers. 15 years off the official roster hadn't dulled the habits. If anything, the paranoia was finer-grained, more sophisticated. It was no longer about spotting costumed megalomaniacs. It was about spotting the subtle tell of a government agent, the awkward body language of a corporate scout, the hungry look of a fan who'd grown up with your poster on their wall. He saw Bob's anomaly the moment he walked in. Not because he was conspicuous, he was the opposite. He moved with a fluid economy that made him seem like an afterthought in the room's visual field. Dressed in simple, earth-tone clothes, he got a small cup of plain vanilla, paid with exact change, and took a seat at a two-person table near the front window, facing the street. He didn't look at Lucius. He didn't scan the room. He just sat, eating his yogurt with a slow, deliberate focus. Lucius felt the old, cold trickle of operational awareness down his spine. This was him. The roof guy. Naruto. Bob's cryptic, tense call yesterday had been a masterpiece of awkward implication. If you happen to be at Yogurt Yo, tomorrow night you might see someone interesting. Not a threat. Just different. Don't do anything. Just see. Bob Parr, master of subtlety. Lucius had almost choked on his own skepticism. But Bob's tone had held a note Lucius hadn't heard in years, not nostalgia, but a ragged, confused hope. So Lucius watched. He saw the perfect posture, the relaxed alertness. He saw the way the man's eyes, when they occasionally lifted from his cup, didn't flit, but settled on a single point for a moment of deep absorption, the traffic light cycle, a child dropping a spoon, the condensation pattern on the window. He was reading the room on a frequency Lucius couldn't access. After 20 minutes, the man stood, disposed of his cup, and walked out. He turned left, away from the main parking lot, heading into the quieter, tree-lined residential streets. Lucius made his excuses to Honey. Forgot I promised Mrs. Gable I'd look at her gutter, it's right around the corner, be back in 10, love you. And slipped out the back, a phantom in a crisp button-down. He moved not with super speed, but with the quiet, practiced grace of a man who knew how to use shadows and angles. He followed at a distance, using parked cars, hedges, the very architecture of suburbia as cover. Naruto walked without haste, a man on an evening stroll. He led Lucius to a small, underfunded neighborhood park, a patch of scraggly grass, a rusting swing set, a bench facing a duckless pond. He sat on the bench and waited. Lucius stood behind a large oak tree 50 yards away, perfectly still. He could flash freeze the pond in a heartbeat. He could coat the ground in black ice. He had taken down giants and robots with a well-placed glacial spike. This felt more dangerous. You can come out, Mr. Best. Naruto called, his voice calm, carrying easily in the still air. He didn't turn his head. The tree's root system is interfering with the sewer line 3 feet below you. The ground is unstable. You're leaning your weight on a void. A chill that had nothing to do with his powers went through Lucius. He stepped out from behind the tree, approaching the bench slowly. He stopped a respectful 10 feet away. That's some observation. It's what I do, Naruto said, finally turning to look at him. His eyes were a clearer blue than Lucius expected, holding a weight of experience that contradicted his youthful face. I observe systems. Structural, social, emotional. They all have stress points. Weaknesses. Bob says you're not a threat. Bob is hoping that's true. You're wiser. You know better than to trust hope. Lucius allowed a thin smile. All right. So let's talk systems. You show up, scare Bob's family, follow him to his secret clubhouse, and now you're luring me to a park. What's the play? Blackmail? Recruitment? Philosophical discussion? Information, Naruto said. And a warning. I'm listening. The system you live in, the relocation, the ban, it's a pressure cooker. The Parr family is at its breaking point. Bob's anger is a structural flaw. Helen's control is a stress-bearing wall showing cracks. Dash is a live wire with no grounding. Violet. He paused. Violet is learning to hate her own heartbeat. And the infant Jack, his power is a seismic event waiting for a trigger. I can feel it from the street. It's not a gift. It's a condition. One this world is utterly unequipped to handle. Lucius's casual posture stiffened. He'd held Jack. He'd felt the weird, buzzing potential under the baby's skin. He'd dismissed it as new parent anxiety. Hearing it confirmed by an outsider was chilling. What's your point? We know it's hard. We live it. My point is, the pressure is about to increase. Exponentially. Naruto leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. There's a man. A corporation. DevTech. The CEO syndrome. Lucius's blood went cold. What about him? He's not just a fanboy with a grudge and a tech empire. He's the end result of your world's philosophy. He's the normal man who looked at your power and didn't see responsibility or sacrifice. He saw unfairness. He saw a brand to be co-opted. And now he's building a world where that brand is owned, controlled, and dispensed by him. He's creating the problem so he can sell the solution. You've met him? Lucius's voice was sharp. No. I've felt his work. The technology has a signature. It's in the city's infrastructure. Surveillance systems with scanning parameters that don't match any criminal database. They're looking for biometric anomalies, for energy signatures. The police response at the bank fire was too fast, too specific. They weren't there for the fire. They were there for Gazerbeam. They were tipped, or they tracked him. Syndrome is building a net. And people like the Parrs, people like you, are the fish? Lucius was silent, his mind racing. He'd heard the rumors on the super grapevine, what was left of it. Tech that could mimic powers. An island fortress. A quiet, systematic buying of political and police influence. He'd dismissed it as the paranoid fantasy of men like Bob, clinging to the idea that they were still important enough to be plotted against. Hearing it laid out with such detached certainty was a bucket of ice water to the face. Why tell me? Lucius asked. Why not go to the authorities? Naruto actually laughed, a short, humorless sound. The authorities are part of the system he's exploiting. Their fear is his fuel. No. This needs a different response. Not a superhero response. A shinobi response. A what? A tactical, unseen, precision response. The goal isn't to punch the robot. It's to find the off switch before the robot is fully assembled. The goal isn't a public battle that destroys city blocks and justifies every fear the public has. The goal is to prevent the battle from ever happening. Lucius studied him. The man spoke of violence with the calm of a surgeon, of strategy with the patience of a spider. You're talking about sabotage. Espionage. I'm talking about protecting a family. Naruto corrected. And by extension, protecting the idea that power can be something other than a curse or a commodity. But I'm an outsider. I don't know the players. I don't know the safe houses, the old contacts, the blind spots in Syndrome's emerging network. You do. So you want me to be your informant? Lucius's voice was flat. I want you to be the voice of reason Bob will listen to when the time comes. I want you to help me map the fault lines so we can reinforce them, not just wait for the earthquake. Naruto stood up, facing him fully. I am not asking you to be Frozone again. I am asking Lucius Best, a man who has survived in this world by being smarter than everyone else, to use that intelligence to protect his friends. The appeal was cunning. It bypassed ego, bypassed nostalgia. It went straight to Lucius's core identity, the survivor, the pragmatist, the man who outthought problems because he couldn't always outpower them. What's in it for you? Lucius asked, the final, essential question. You drop into our world, see our mess, and decide to play guardian angel? I don't buy altruism. Nobody's that pure. For the first time, a shadow passed over Naruto's face. A genuine, deep-seated pain. I failed to protect my people once. An entire generation, carved out by a war I couldn't stop in time. I carry those names. Every day. I look at Violet Parr, and I see a young kunoichi I couldn't save. I look at Dash and see a comrade who died because he was too fast for his own good. I look at Bob and see myself. If I had given up, if I had let the world convince me I was a monster to be locked away. He met Lucius's gaze, and the raw conviction there was staggering. I can't save my world. It's saved. But maybe I can help yours from making the same mistakes. Maybe I can keep one family from shattering under the weight of a fear they didn't create. That's what's in it for me. Atonement is a daily practice. The silence that followed was profound. The distant sounds of traffic faded. Lucius believed him. It was the worst possible outcome, because it meant this strange, scarred young man was for real, and that made the danger infinitely more complex. All right, Lucius said finally, exhaling a plume of frost-tinged breath he hadn't realized he was holding. I'll listen. I'll point you in some directions. But I'm not suiting up. I'm not getting Honey involved. And if this goes south, if I smell a setup, a manipulation, you'll find out why they called me Frozone. And it won't be about making slick exits. Naruto nodded, accepting the terms. Understood. First direction, I need to understand Syndrome's reach. Not the public tech. The quiet acquisitions. The shell companies. The political donations. Lucius rubbed his temple. There's a guy. Used to do tech support for heroes back in the day. A gearhead. He got pushed out after the ban, bitter. He runs a salvage yard and repair shop on the edge of the industrial zone. He hears things. Sees the tech that gets lost or decommissioned and quietly resold. His name is Rusty. Rusty McAllister. Tell him Frozone sent you, and the ice machine is still broken. He'll talk. Or he'll shoot at you. It's a coin toss. Thank you, Naruto said. He turned to go, then paused. Bob is going to do something reckless soon. The pressure is too high. He'll see an opportunity to be Mr. Incredible again, and he'll take it. It will be a trap. Not necessarily Syndrome's, but the world's. When he does, don't try to stop him alone. Come find me. He walked away, disappearing into the gloom between two streetlights. Lucius stood by the empty pond, the frost from his anxious breath crystallizing on the bench beside him. He felt the old calculus clicking back into place in his mind, the cold equations of risk and reward he'd sworn off. The peaceful, quiet life he'd built with Honey was a beautiful fiction, and this stranger had just pulled back the curtain. The system was indeed a pressure cooker, and Naruto wasn't turning off the heat. He was trying to install a release valve before the whole thing exploded. The problem with release valves, Lucius thought as he walked back to the blinding cheer of Yogurt Yo, was that they only worked if you recognized the pressure for what it was. And Bob Parr had spent 15 years pretending he wasn't under any pressure at all. The explosion, when it came, wouldn't be quiet. And Lucius had a terrible feeling he just agreed to help a stranger try to catch the shrapnel. The frozen calculus of survival had just gotten a lot more complicated. Chapter 6: The Salvage Heart. The industrial zone on Metroville's southern edge was a graveyard of ambition. Skeletons of factories, their windows punched out like sightless eyes, stood sentinel over fields of rusting machinery and mountains of scrap metal. The air tasted of ozone, decay, and the faint, acrid tang of chemical runoff. It was a place the city's gleaming prosperity forgot, a perfect place to bury secrets, or sell them for parts. Rusty McAllister's Salvage and Precision Repair was a kingdom of corrosion, a labyrinth of stacked shipping containers, eviscerated vehicles, and cannibalized industrial robots. A flickering neon sign, more off than on, buzzed like an angry insect. Naruto approached not as a ghost, but as a potential customer, his steps crunching on gravel, his senses extended. The energy here was a chaotic miasma. Residual electromagnetic pulses from dead electronics, the sluggish heat of decomposing metal, and beneath it all, a single, focused point of fierce, intelligent concentration. It came from a large, repurposed cargo container with a welding arc flickering at its open door. A man in grease-stained coveralls and a battered welding mask was bent over the innards of what looked like a decommissioned construction exoskeleton. His movements were quick, precise, fueled by a kind of furious competence. Naruto stopped a respectful distance away and waited. The welder shut off his torch, flipped up his mask, and fixed Naruto with a glare from one good eye. The other was a milky, blind orb. His face was a roadmap of old burns and deeper resentments. We're closed. Scrap prices are down. Go away. Rusty McAllister? Naruto asked. Who's asking? And if you're from the city about the zoning, I pay my bribes on time. Frozone sent me. He said the ice machine is still broken. The change in the man was instantaneous. The aggression didn't vanish, but it sharpened, focusing like a laser sight. He set down his torch with deliberate care. Is that so? He wiped his hands on a rag that was more oil than fabric. Lucius doesn't send people. Not ever. Which means you're either the reason he's breaking his own rules, or you're very good at pretending to be. I'm the reason, Naruto said simply. Rusty gave a short, barking laugh. Figures. You've got that look. Not cop. Not corporate. Not hero. Something else. Wound up tight, but not with muscle. With intention. Come inside. The local wildlife gets curious. He led Naruto into the cargo container, which was a marvel of organized chaos. Workbenches groaned under disassembled technology from a dozen different eras. Old hero comms gear, police frequency scramblers, sleek dev-tech consumer drones with their casings cracked open. Schematics were pinned to the walls, some yellowed with age, others fresh printouts. It was a museum of applied power and its obsolescence. So, Rusty said, hopping onto a stool and lighting a cigarette. Lucius gives you the passphrase. That means he thinks you're either the solution to a problem or a bigger problem he wants me to identify. Which is it? Both, probably, Naruto said, his eyes scanning a schematic for a handheld energy-dampening field generator. I need to understand Syndrome. Not the public face. The infrastructure. The procurement network. Rusty's good eye narrowed. Why? To protect a family from walking into a trap they're desperate to see as a doorway. The PARS. It wasn't a question. Rusty took a long drag. Bob's been a ticking bomb for a decade. Helen's the only thing keeping the pin in. You think Syndrome's gunning for them? I think Syndrome is building a new world order where super is a product he controls. The PARS are a potent symbol. Either they become a trophy in his display case, or a demonstration of why his product is necessary. Either way, they're in the crosshairs. Naruto pointed to a partially dismantled drone on a bench. Its housing was sleek, white, and emblazoned with a subtle D logo. This is his. It's not a consumer model. The sensor array is military grade. Biometric, thermal, broad-spectrum energy scanning. Rusty grunted, impressed despite himself. You know your hardware. Yeah, that's a Watcher model. Not for sale. Gifted to certain municipal police departments as part of DevTech's public safety partnership. They're seated all over the city. Networked. They don't just look for crime. They profile. They look for physiological anomalies, unusual energy signatures, reactive movements outside human norms. They're building a real-time map of every super, active or latent, in Metroville. A cold knot formed in Naruto's gut. It was worse than he'd suspected. And the PARS? Oh, they're flagged. Has to be. Bob's biometrics are probably still on file from the old days. Helen's too. The kids, if they've ever had a medical episode, even a weird fever, it's in a database Syndrome's AI is no doubt crunching. Rusty stabbed his cigarette out on the bench. It's a system, see? The ban made everyone hide. Hiding makes you anxious, stressed. Stress causes physiological spikes, adrenaline, body temperature fluctuations, weird brainwave activity. The Watchers see those spikes in normal civilians and flag them for review. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. The very act of suppressing your power marks you for the system. The brilliant, insidious cruelty of it took Naruto's breath away. It was a psychological torture device on a civic scale. He's not just hunting them. He's making their own biology the snitch. Exactly, Rusty said, a grim respect in his voice. Now you asked about procurement. That's the scary part. Syndrome isn't just buying politicians. He's buying the past. He swung off his stool and pulled a tarp off a large object in the corner. It was a suit of armor. Bulky, metallic, painted in garish, fading colors. It was clearly old, from the glory days, but the damage was fresh, huge dents, claw marks, and scorch patterns that spoke of catastrophic, recent failure. This was delivered to me 3 weeks ago, Rusty said. As scrap. It's the armor of Bruiser, a second-tier strongman from the 60s. Retired after the ban. Lived in Arizona. Died last month. Obituary said peacefully in his sleep. Rusty rapped a knuckle on a chest plate. The metal gave a hollow, compromised sound. This armor was hit with a concentrated plasma beam at point-blank range. The kind of tech that didn't exist publicly until DevTech unveiled its security drone line last year. This wasn't a peaceful death. This was a field test. The pieces slammed together in Naruto's mind with awful clarity. He's collecting them. The old heroes. Studying their weaknesses. Using them to beta test his weapons. Collecting or culling, Rusty said darkly. He's cleaning the chessboard. The ones who won't play his game, who are too proud or too scared to come out of hiding, they're retired. Their tech, their DNA samples, it all gets shipped back to his R&D labs on Nomanison Island. It's a closed loop. He uses the past to build the future, and the future is a world where the only superpower is the one you buy from him. Naruto stared at the ruined armor, a tombstone for a man who probably thought the greatest danger was boredom. The scope of Syndrome's operation was vast, cold, and terrifyingly logical. This wasn't the ranting of a jilted fan. It was the business plan of a visionary monopolist who saw people as intellectual property. The Pars are on that list, Naruto stated. At the top of it, I'd wager, Rusty agreed. Bob's the gold standard for brute strength. Helen's flexibility is a biomechanical nightmare to counter. Their DNA alone is a treasure trove. And the kids? He shook his head. Latent, developing powers? That's the holy grail. Syndrome wouldn't just want to retire them. He'd want them in a lab, to see how the sausage is made. The container felt suddenly claustrophobic, the weight of all this buried history and impending doom pressing in. How does he find them? The retired ones? Rusty tapped the side of his nose. The super community was small, tight-knit. We knew each other's secrets, our safe houses, our vices. Syndrome was the ultimate fanba. He had the memorabilia, the newsletters, the clandestine meeting spots. He knows the gossip. And now he has the resources to act on it. My guess? He's using a combination of old fan club records, hacking pension funds for the relocated, and the data from his watchers to triangulate. He walked to a messy desk and pulled out a rumpled, hand-drawn map of the metropolitan area. Dozens of small X's were marked in different neighborhoods. These are the last known addresses I've been able to piece together for retired actives. From chatter, from weird accidents reported on the police scanner, from scrap that mysteriously shows up with battle damage. He pointed to a cluster of X's in the quiet suburb of Municyberg. 5 names in this area have gone radio silent in the last 4 months. Not dead according to records. Just vanished. Naruto studied the map. The pattern was there, a slow, systematic harvesting. He's working his way through a list. Methodical. Patient. Until he gets impatient, Rusty said. Or until a bigger prize presents itself. Something to accelerate his timeline. He looked meaningfully at Naruto. Something like a brand new, unregistered, completely anomalous power signature showing up in the middle of a downtown fire, and then sniffing around the Parr family. So, he knew. Of course he did. The salvage man saw everything. They'll come for you too, Rusty said, not unkindly. You're a loose variable. Syndrome hates those. And the government, if they get a whiff of you, they'll see a foreign operative with unknown capabilities. You'll have nowhere to run. Naruto absorbed the warning without reaction. The danger was a known quantity now. It had shape and strategy. That was better than the formless dread of the unknown. Thank you for the information, Rusty. Don't thank me. I just gave you enough rope to hang yourself and the Pars with. The old mechanic sighed, the anger draining from him, leaving a residue of profound weariness. I loved the gear. The tech. The idea of it. Building things to help people be better. Then I saw what it did. The collateral damage. The lawsuits. The way the public turned. Now I see the next generation of tech, and it's not about helping anyone be better. It's about making sure no one can be better unless they pay for the privilege. It's an ugly circle. He looked at his ruined hands. Maybe you can break it. Or maybe you'll just be another piece of scrap for me to sort through one day. Naruto placed a hand on the cold, dented chest plate of Bruiser's armor. He could almost feel the echo of the old hero's final, shocked betrayal. I won't be scrap, he said, his voice low but absolute. And neither will they. He left the cargo container, the buzzing neon sign casting his long, distorted shadow across the field of rusted dreams. The salvage yard had given him the heart of the machine. Syndrome ambition was a furnace, fed by the bones of the past, and it was heating up. Bob Parr, stewing in his powerlessness, was a prime piece of fuel. And Naruto now knew the exact temperature at which that fuel would ignite. He needed to get to Bob before Syndrome did. But more urgently, he needed to prepare the ground for the explosion he could no longer prevent. He needed to talk to Helen, the strategist. The one who understood that sometimes, protecting your family meant moving them into the path of the controlled blast, because standing still meant being buried by the rubble. The real battle wasn't on some island fortress. It was here, in the quiet streets, in the strained silence of a suburban home. The war for the future was being fought in the salvage yards of the past, and Naruto Uzumaki was now its reluctant, informed general. Chapter 7, The Elastigirl Gambit. Helen Parr was auditing the family budget when she felt it. A presence at the edge of her perception, not a sound or a shadow, but a subtle alteration in the fabric of her carefully monitored environment. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up. It was a school afternoon. Dash was at soccer practice, running at precisely 10% of his capacity, a constant, agonizing calculation. Violet was in her room, a sphere of quiet tension. Bob was at work, a boiling thunderhead of frustration she could feel from miles away. Jack napped, his crib a nexus of faint, chaotic energy fluctuations she had learned to interpret like a meteorologist reads low-pressure systems. She didn't look up from the spreadsheet. If you're here to sell something, we're not buying. If you're here to threaten, you've chosen the wrong house. If you're Naruto, the back door is unlocked. I'm in the kitchen. She heard the soft click of the latch, the nearly inaudible pad of footsteps on the tile. He entered and stood just inside the doorway, a respectful distance. She finally lifted her gaze. He looked ordinary, tired. His eyes held a weight she recognized, the burden of preemptive grief, of knowing a storm is coming and being responsible for those who don't see the clouds. It was the look she saw in her own mirror. "You've been busy," she said, her voice neutral, a scalpel. "Visiting my husband in his secret clubhouse. Having quiet talks with my daughter in the yard. Meeting with Lucius. Now you're in my kitchen. You're either the most reckless person I've ever met, or you're building something. Which is it?" "Both," he said, echoing his statement to Rusty. He didn't try to smile or put her at ease. He respected her too much for that. "I'm building an understanding. And the recklessness is a calculated one. The alternative is a passive doom." Helen leaned back in her chair, her posture deceptively relaxed. Inside, every fiber was a tripwire. Doom is a strong word. We have a life. A difficult one, a suppressed one, but a life. School plays. Mortgages. Dental appointments. Doom is for people who play dress up and punch robots. Doom is for families on a list they don't know they're on. Naruto countered quietly. For children whose biology is being cataloged as a corporate asset. For a father whose every moment of frustration is a data point in a psychological profile being used to design his own cage. The spreadsheet blurred before Helen's eyes. He wasn't speaking in metaphors. He had specifics. The cold, tactical part of her mind, the part that was Elastigirl, engaged with a sharp, painful click. "Tell me." He did. He told her about Rusty McAllister, the salvage yard, the Watcher drones with their broad-spectrum scans. He told her about the armor of Bruiser, the plasma burns, the systematic retirement of old heroes. He laid out Syndrome's strategy with the chilling clarity of a military briefing, the creation of a problem, the controlled, public menace of his own robots, the marketing of a solution, his technology, his control, and the harvesting of the competition, the supers themselves. He explained how the PARs, as a genetic goldmine and a potent symbolic threat, were not just potential targets, but central objectives. Helen listened without interruption. Her face was a mask of calm, but her hands, resting on the table, had stretched slightly, her fingers elongating by almost an inch before she consciously reined them in. The normalcy of her kitchen, the checkered curtains, the cooling coffee pot, the crayon drawing of their family on the fridge, where Violet had drawn herself as a faint smudge, seemed to recede, replaced by the sterile, horrifying geometry of a conspiracy board. When he finished, the silence was profound. The hum of the refrigerator was suddenly deafening. "Bob," she said finally, her voice hollow. "He's going to do something. This information, it's not a warning to him. It's a lure." Naruto nodded. "He's a man drowning in irrelevance. Syndrome's entire scheme is a giant, flashing danger sign. For Bob, it won't look like a trap. It will look like a purpose. A chance to be the solution, to be Mr. Incredible saving the day from a new, high-tech villain. He'll walk into it with his eyes wide open, because finally seeing a threat is better than the nothing he sees now." Helen closed her eyes. He was right. She knew her husband. The frustration, the clandestine workouts, the way he stared at the news footage of Gazerbeam, it was all a bowstring being drawn back. All Syndrome had to do was provide a target. And from what Naruto described, Syndrome was a master at providing exactly the target his enemy wanted to see. "We have to stop him," she said, but the words lacked conviction. Stopping Bob when he was like this was like stopping a boulder rolling downhill. You could maybe deflect it, but you'd break yourself in the process. "We can't," Naruto said, surprising her. "And we shouldn't." Her eyes snapped open. "What?" "If we stop him, the pressure doesn't vanish. It compounds. It will find another, more catastrophic release. Maybe at home. Maybe with the kids. And Syndrome will just devise another lure. The trap remains." He took a step closer, his blue eyes intent. "We don't stop him. We use him." Helen stared at him. The sheer, bald-faced audacity of the statement took her breath away. "Use my husband as bait. As a distraction. As a focal point." Naruto's voice was low, urgent. "Syndrome's plan relies on spectacle. On a public, dramatic demonstration of his superiority over the obsolete hero. He'll want to capture Bob, humiliate him, study him, probably on his island. He'll be focused on that prize. It will draw his resources, his attention, his ego. And while he's focused on Bob," Helen whispered, the strategist in her suddenly seeing the brutal, elegant shape of it. "We go after the real vulnerability," Naruto finished. "Not Syndrome. Not his robots. His system. The Watcher network. The data hubs. The recruitment and procurement pipelines. The public perception machine. We don't attack the fist. We cut the nerves that tell the fist where to swing. We use the spectacle he's creating to dismantle the stage he's built. It was an Elastigirl gambit. Unorthodox, flexible, targeting weakness over strength. It was also horrifying. It meant letting Bob walk into the lion's den. It meant trusting this stranger, this anomaly from another world, with the safety of her family. It meant going to war with a billion-dollar tech empire from the shadows. The children, she said, her voice cracking for the first time. I will not risk my children. They're already at risk, Naruto said, not unkindly, but with relentless truth. Every day they spend in this house, suppressing who they are being wounded. Syndrome's drones are cataloging Dash's metabolic spikes during soccer. They're noting Violet's unique low-energy signature when she retreats. Jack's anomalies are a siren call. Hiding is no longer protection. It's a countdown. He leaned on the table, his gaze holding hers. I can't offer you safety, Helen. No one can. But I can offer you a strategy. Instead of waiting for the blow to fall, we choose the ground. We use Bob's inevitable move to create an opening. And while Syndrome is gloating over his trophy, we hit him where he's soft, in his data, in his legitimacy, in his illusion of control. Helen pushed back from the table and walked to the window. She looked out at the manicured lawn, the quiet street. The illusion of safety. It was just that, an illusion, painted over a network of silent, watching machines and corporate greed. Bob saw the cage as made of laws and office jobs. She saw now it was made of code and capital. Both were real. Both were crushing them. What's your role in this? She asked, her back to him. You could walk away. This isn't your world. I made it my world the moment I saw Violet trying to erase herself, he said, his voice soft behind her. I have a responsibility to the next generation. To see that they aren't taught to hate their own hearts. Your fight is my fight. Not because you're supers. Because you're a family. She turned to face him. The afternoon sun slanted through the window, illuminating the dust motes in the air, the fine lines of stress around her eyes. I need contingencies. For if you're wrong. For if this fails. For getting my family out. Of course, he said. We plan for failure. We train for disaster. We prepare Violet and Dash not as soldiers, but as survivors. We give them tools, not just to hide, but to see, to evade, to protect themselves and each other. We treat Jack not as a time bomb, but as a child who needs to learn what a normal state feels like, so he can recognize when he's deviating from it. It was the first time anyone had spoken about her children's powers as something that could be educated, rather than merely suppressed. The distinction was everything. Lucius? She asked. He'll provide logistical support. Intelligence. He won't be on the front lines, but he'll be our eyes and ears. And our escape route, if it comes to that. Helen took a deep, stretching breath, feeling the familiar, comforting tension in her limbs, a reminder of the power she, too, kept locked down. She was Elastigirl. The strategist. The one who could bend without breaking, who could find the path through impossible gaps. This was the ultimate test. Not of her strength, but of her flexibility. Not of her power to punch, but of her will to endure a terrible risk for a chance at a real future. All right, she said, the word final, heavy with consequence. We do it your way. But we do it smart. Every step. Bob can't know. He can't act like he's part of a plan. His reaction, his desperation, has to be real for Syndrome to buy it. Agreed, Naruto said, a flicker of profound respect in his eyes. We start tonight. With Violet and Dash. Not with fighting. With seeing. With feeling. We teach them to sense the watchers. To feel the scan. To become aware of the net so they can move through its holes. Helen nodded, her mind already shifting, the worried mother compartmentalized, the tactician taking the helm. The family budget was forgotten. A new, more dire calculation had begun. The cost of action was terrifying. The cost of inaction, she now understood, was extinction of their spirit, their family, their very right to exist. The Elastigirl gambit was set. They would bend, twist, and stretch the rules of this silent war until they found a way to snap the trap shut on the trapper. The quiet kitchen was now a war room, and the first, most painful move was to let her husband march, eyes open, into the dark.